Hello everyone and welcome to another Dark Ground. In this video, the famous haunted house in Amityville, we talk about the murder and the paranormal events which gained the house notoriety. So, stay tuned. Hello everyone and welcome to your third installment of the Dark Ground. In this video, as you'd have heard from the intro, we will be discussing that famous haunted house in Amityville, Long Island. The, of course, ominous 112 Ocean Avenue and the murder and the subsequent paranormal events which led a family to flee from the house 28 days after they'd moved in. Starting with the murder part of it, of course, on November 13th of 1974, Ronald DeFeo, the oldest son of Ronald Sr. and Louise DeFeo, shot and killed every member of his family that night at 112 Ocean Avenue, the famous haunted house. He claimed a apparition with dark hands gave him the gun after he'd heard what he thought he'd heard his family conspiring to kill him in the next room. He went up and shot his mother and father, then his two brothers, his younger sister, and these two sisters. He would later rant from prison that there was supernatural thing that's going on in the house, that there was something there was an evil, malevolent force that was there. And some would say that will be backed up by the very reason that no one heard any of the gunshots, no one in the family, not even the neighbours. The only thing that was heard from the house that night was the family dog barking. So the fact that no one heard the gunshots is the most puzzling part of the crime itself, and leads credence to the notion that something more was going on in that house than what was led to believe. Now, the following year, in December of 1975, George and Kathy Lutz and their three children, Daniel, Christopher and Melissa, move into 112 Ocean Avenue after falling in love with it. But not after. Whilst viewing the house, they were told after they'd fallen in love with the house about its gruesome past and about what happened there. But they decided it wasn't going to make any difference on living there, and decided to move in at that time. But almost immediately, when they had moved in immediately within those first immediate hours or days, things started to happen. The family dog, chained outside, jumped the fence and was practically hanging itself because of something to do with the garage. Whether it'd seen something in the garage or whether there was some not so nice presence about the garage, it was all centered around the garage. Other such phenomena that started to happen, or that did happen, was they had a priest come and bless the house the day they moved in. He would later tell them not to use the sewing room on the second floor, as a bedroom because he thought it wouldn't be appropriate. But it didn't come out until later what actually happened to him when he was in that room. He was blessing the room and he felt it go cold. And in his words, he'd say, he found that very strange, as it was a lovely day out. It was in winter time, so it would have been cold, but it didn't account for that level of cold that was in the room. And during the time he was blessing that room, he heard a deep voice behind him tell him to get out. And then he was slapped across the face. And that is what the priest revealed happened that day that he blessed that room. Later on, in fact, in that room, it would always be infested with flies. Talking 400, anywhere between 400 and 500 flies. And it was a dead of winter, and you wouldn't expect swarms of flies to be around in the winter. George, the father, George Lutz, would be attacked by a cold sensation, and he would become obsessed with making fires to try and keep warm, to the point where he would obsess over having enough firewood, whether there would be enough firewood to keep burning for fires. Kathy, the mother, Kathy Lutz, felt like she'd been touched on multiple occasions by unseen hands. Slowly and surely, their personalities began to change in the house, like the personalities of the DeFeos before. Arguments and violence started to break out, exactly like within the DeFeo family. George kept being snapped awake at 3:15 every night or early morning, the established time of the killings of the DeFeo family. Kathy, alternatively, would have vivid dreams in which she dreamed about the murders, so vivid that she was able to tell people where the bullets went in and went out of Mrs. DeFeo. A piece of information that the police never made public. Slowly, but inexplicably, the influence of what was going on in the house moved on to the kids. And, most importantly, Missy, or Melissa, who at the time was 5 years old, she would say that she had an imaginary friend, and it took the form of a large pig with red eyes. And it would tell her things like, "I'm glad you are staying here." And it would tell her things that it said that they knew that she wouldn't be able to make up. It wasn't until a while after that Jody, this pig, imaginary friend of Melissa's, made itself known to other people within the family. George was walking back from the boathouse one night and saw red eyes staring out of the window at him from Melissa's room. He'd go up to the room and nothing would be there. There'd be occasions where he'd see a pair of red eyes looking in, and there'd be occasion where they'd walk past Melissa's room and see her sat on the bed talking, and glance and see her rocking chair rocking back and forth. Well, of course, she was sat on the bed. The Lutzes did find and uncover a room within the basement of 112 Ocean Avenue that was not on the original house plans. It was a little red room. They didn't know what this room was, and they thought it very odd, even thought it more disturbing when their dog, Harry, wouldn't go anywhere near it and would cry. They'd have other such phenomena, like hearing, as George would say, if I describe to you a sound as loud as a marching band downstairs, and I'd be hearing it. And Kathy, you wouldn't know how Kathy could sleep through it. They'd hear the front door slamming, and when they're going to investigate, the door would be locked. And there was other such noises which they were not should never be accustomed to in a house. Bangings, scratchings, even black slime coming out of fixtures, bathroom fixtures. They'd found their attempts to try and call Father Ralph Pegoraro, the priest who blessed the house, thwarted with interference on the line, and when he tried to call, it would be the exact same. When he talked about helping the Lutz family, the heat in the radiator in his office was heard to rise in the pipe, and that was just mere mention of helping the Lutzes. Now, 28 days after moving in, the Lutzes experience a night a night of terror which they say they will never forget. A night which they never ever talked about after leaving. Never ever talked about it before subsequently both Kathy and George died. They fled after 28 days, leaving everything they owned except a few changes of clothes in the house. And it was purported that when the paranormal investigators and subsequent film crew went in later, they would say it was like they had just gone out for the day, but they weren't joking when they'd said they'd up and left. In the early days after leaving the Amityville house or 112 Ocean Avenue, Kathy and George made some tapes for self-help. They thought making these tapes would help them make sense of their time and the events that happened in that house. In the meantime, George Lutz had called a handful of area parapsychologists about the house and about doing an investigation in the house. One of those people he called was Stephen Kaplan, the founder of the Long Island Parapsychology Research. And when George had saw that he was representing himself as a vampirologist, he didn't think those credentials made sense to him and called off the investigation. But however, Kaplan and his wife said that George gave another reason for why he called off the investigation, citing that George had said, "You spoke to the press and I didn't want any publicity." But the Kaplans, however, said if he didn't want publicity, why did he attend a press conference led by the lawyer of Ronald DeFeo Jr., the guy that killed his family in the house before? And they'd only attended that press conference under a threat that they would go send reporters to the school where the kids were to get the information. So that is why they agreed to the press conference. Stephen Kaplan would go on a 20-year crusade after that to try and expose this story as a fraud, that it was a commercial venture, nothing more, nothing less. Later down the line, George was contacted by young news reporter at the time, Laura DiDio, and she was aware that they weren't talking to people much, that they didn't trust people as far as parapsychology and other people were concerned. But she put them in touch with well-known American demonologist Ed and Lorraine Warren. and they agreed to let Ed and Lorraine Warren investigate 112 Ocean Avenue. And when it wasn't even a week after they had fled from the house that Ed and Lorraine Warren went into the house to do an investigation. And what they sensed in that house was something of pure evil. In Ed's words himself, he knew that on a scale of 1 to 10, this house was a 10 on a paranormal scale, that they weren't dealing with a normal haunted house. Lorraine, whilst in the sewing room, the room that had all the flies and that Father Ralph Pecoraro was slapped in, turned to Marvin Scott, the reporter that was in the house during the investigation, and Marvin Scott said to her, "What is it?" And Lorraine Warren said, in her exact words, "I hope this is as close to hell as I'll ever get." Meaning that something in that house was from the bowels of the earth and something rather unholy. Ed, whilst investigating the basement, said he was assailed by a spirit, and it felt like a waterfall was pushing him down to the ground. And that was the moment he knew what they were dealing with was a 10 on the scale of paranormal. They would later return for a second investigation and bring along paranormal or mediums and paranormal investigators, and they would catch stuff, including a photo taken from a camera that was snapping photos upstairs of a boy looking out of the room, or a room. There was no children present during that investigation, and no one has said it could have been the spirit manifesting himself as a boy, or it could have been the spirit of one of the little DeFeo boys that were killed in the house. Ed and Lorraine were convinced that there was something in that house. Later on, another parapsychologist, Hans Holzer, would go and investigate the house with deep trance medium Ethel Merman. And when they went in there, the deep trance medium got in touch with a Indian chief that was said to be buried somewhere around or on that land. And Hans Holzer believed that it was an Indian chief because of a photograph of that night of him standing in front of the medium, and what he said superimposed on the picture a white mist-like spectre of an Indian on a horse. Hans Holzer describes the house as not a haunted house per se. What went on in that house, especially with the DeFeo murder, was the relationship between a troubled person and the angry Indian spirit. And he believes that is what is the catalyst for what happened within the house, being on sacred land. Of course, the Kaplins didn't believe that in their crusade, think that Ed and Lorraine Warren are the most dangerous people and just make money, they're frauds and make money from the field that they worked in. They said Hans Holzer just made up the Indian theory because he was in the process of writing a book about it and decided to put it there because it was more convenient. They would also go and attack the books that came out, the Amityville Horror, written by Jay Anson, about the mistakes, saying that there was mistakes and unfactual things within the book. The Kaplins and William Webber are just a few people, William Webber being the attorney for Ronald DeFeo Jr., being a few people that believe that what happened at 112 Ocean Avenue was a hoax, a commercial a commercial venture made up by the Lutzes to make money off of what happened in the house previously. Others, like Ed and Lorraine Warren and Franz Holzer, both believed that there was something not of this world within the house or on the property there at 112 Ocean Avenue. Avid believers that something was there. It is worth noting that the family that moved in after the Lutzes didn't experience a thing, and brought a lawsuit against the Lutzes for invasion of privacy for all of the people that came. Ghost hunters or would-be ghost hunters coming to the house, to the famous house. But as Ed put it himself, and this is very true in paranormal information and law, two people could be in a room and a ghost projects itself to one of them, but the other person doesn't see it because that ghost is projecting itself to one of them. And that has been very prevalent in other cases. I'd like to bring up one case within Ghost Adventures, an American paranormal TV program, where one of the guys saw they were in what was formerly the Linda Vista Hospital in California, and he experienced saw a ghost right up close proximity of him, but no one else in the room saw it. So it lends credence to that theory. And now I'm going to give my opinion and my thoughts on the case. I, being a believer in the paranormal, believe that something not quite right and something of paranormal origin definitely occurred in that house for a short period of time. And I'm led to believe, and I, in my opinion, believe that that's true because of the one fact I brought up earlier. How no one in the house, and no neighbours heard Ronald DeFeo shooting and killing his family, and none of his family waking up when the gunshots were happening. They weren't drugged, and they weren't held against their will. Something within that house was inhibiting the sound, so no one could hear what was going on. And I truly believe that that is what the case was. I believe that there was something in that house that showed itself to two families, that caused problems for two families, a tragedy for one family, and 28 days of hell for another family. And I do realise there'll be people that come at me and say, that they believe it's a hoax. And that's okay. That's your opinion. Everyone is entitled to their opinion, and there will be people that will come at me that will say it was proven to be a hoax. But from what I've seen, Kathy and George Lutz, until their dying day, never said it was a hoax. They went to their grave saying that it was all true. Their son, Daniel, in a documentary which you can, my Amityville Horror, which you can find on YouTube, also validates the claims of what happened in that house. So I'm inclined to believe that what happened to them, there was more truth in what happened to them than people like to believe. And that is the story of the house at 112 Ocean Avenue in Amityville, Long Island, New York. Site of a family massacre and site of a family hell that lasted 28 days. Kathy and George Lutz, now sadly are deceased, have passed away. Kathy, I will leave you with this, experienced one thing within the house. When she looked into a mirror, she saw herself all old. Kathy would later die of a respiratory condition which made her age. And people believe that is one of a number of coincidences to happen, or influences to happen after it carried on happening. Now I'm going to leave it open for your opinions on what you believe. You can do the research and look up the information yourself, whether you believe it's a hoax or whether you believe, like myself, that there's something more to it, that there's truth to it. You decide. And on that note, another Dark Ground episode comes to an end. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and check out our Twitter link within the description and visit our Twitter page. It'd be much grateful and helpful to me and Joe and our channel. And I will leave you with these words. Keep the lights on and don't have nightmares. And remember, what's under your bed isn't the only thing, and the only thing that you necessarily have to worry about. Until next time, sleep tight.